And you have 4 kids that I know, right?
Yes.
We just want to know how your married life is, if there is anything that we can learn from that.
Yeah. I always tell people I love my marriage and my wife so much. I wish I was born married. I really do enjoy married life. And I'm just so thankful for having been privileged to have someone. Hiwat is my wife,
Okay.
and this June we will be 12 years married, and so that's just quite
a little long time.
a celebration for us, and we're just thankful to God for that. It has just been quite a joy to journey together and do life. She's my best friend. She's my companion. She's my partner in life and in ministry. She's my confidant. She's the one I go to. She's my strength, my backbone. She is what explains me and how I'm able to do anything that I'm able to do at all. And so I tell you, I say all of this to say this: who you marry is going to have a huge impact on what is going to be made up of the rest of your life. And so that's why you want to move very wisely, very carefully in the realm of dating and relationship and marriage. It's nothing to play with. It's nothing to fool around with or tamper with. It is a serious move to make on the chessboard, because many of those decisions that accompany marriage are irreversible in many ways. And there's nothing that comes anywhere close to the character and the heart of God like marriage. Nothing comes close to what we see in the union between Jesus and his bride, the church, like marriage. That's why God decided to use marriage as the very thing on this earth to display it. And therefore, it's going to be the place where warfare and where battle is going to rage the most. Because if the enemy hates God, he's going to hate everything that God is behind. And God's behind marriage. And therefore, you better believe that when you decide to go God's way in relationship, all hell is going to break loose. My marriage has helped me in ministry. It helps me with life. It helps me in our parenting. Our marriage comes first, then our children in our parenting. We're married couple first, then we're parents. My marriage comes before even my ministry outside. That's how I see it. In the 80s and 90s, it used to be, you look after your ministry, God will look after your marriage. But in fact, I see it as, you look after your ministry in marriage, God will look after your ministry outside of marriage. And I've seen that as I've prioritized our ministry at home with each other. I've noticed God bless the ministry outside of the doors of the church. And I think my generation of 20-somethings and 30-somethings have seen our previous role models and ministers who put marriage on the back burner.
First is ministry.
And ministry, and it wreaked havoc. And a lot of the kids were disillusioned with calling and with pastoral ministry and with preaching and wanting to give themselves to the Lord because they saw what happened in the home. And I didn't want that. I didn't want my kids to grow up in that environment. I wanted my kids to grow up and looking at my relationship with my wife and say, I want to be married myself. And I had to ask that question. What would our marriage have to look like for my kids to not say, I don't want to get married when I get older? Because that's what I hear a lot among teenagers and 20s. I'm not getting married. I'm holding off on that as long as I possibly can. Why? Because of what they saw growing up. I don't want that. Is marriage easy? Is it roses? Has it just been smooth and fine for us? No. We've had our hang-ups. We've had our challenges in our own relationship and in our own marriage, largely due to me. And I'm thankful for a gracious, patient, forgiving wife and friend.
It's so nice, really. Okay.
Well, I would say it's the truth. But God has used marriage as a sanctifying means in our life. And marriage is not so much about my personal happiness or our personal happiness, so much as it is about our personal holiness. It's been the anvil upon which God has produced more and more Christ-likeness in our life. And I'm thankful that I'm in a stage in my life having learned what I've learned about God precisely because of what He's done with us together. Yeah.
So as you say it, like when you get married, if your life was like this, either you go up or you can be way down.
That's right.
It depends on how you choose and
Yes.
who you choose.
Yeah.
So there is wisdom required.
Yes.
You mentioned about that. What is that wisdom? Can
Yeah.
you tell us?
Well, 2 Corinthians 6:14 tells us, don't be unequally yoked. What fellowship does light have with darkness? Christ with Belial, the kingdom of light with the kingdom of darkness, and so forth. In other words, if we're going to go forward for marriage, we've got to be on the same team. We've got to wear the same jersey. My God has got to be her God. My faith has got to be her faith. We've got to ask questions of, what faith are we going to pass down to our kids? What beliefs do we have? What core values do we have? What common theology do we have? Do we worship the same God? Are we living for the same mission? These are things that are going to surround our marriage for the lifetime of it. And to merely have a few things that we're compatible in is not enough. We need to make sure that we are one in these areas that are going to play vital in our life and in our relationship and in our marriage. And so I would encourage, the best way you can know who that person is and whether they're the one is by first making sure you're the one. And so I often encourage a lot of our young people who want to learn a lot about dating and about relationship and marriage is, instead of spending all of your energy and all of your time and resources figuring out who the right one is, use that same time being the right one, becoming the right one. Use that same energy using that season of your life becoming the right one, and leave it up to God to, in His providence, make sure you're going to find whoever that is. When I'm developing myself and I end up becoming who God actually wants me to be, there's a certain kind of person, woman, that I have eyes for that I would not have had eyes for before I developed myself. And a lot of people fail to realize that. And I think that's something that needs to be mentioned again and again and again, because when I see God take my life to a certain stage, my character, my maturity level, the things that are my values now, the things that I prioritize in my life, how I'm using my life, there are certain women that are not going to match that stage of my life. And it doesn't matter what they may have going for them on this level. They may be attractive, they may have a good, decent job, they may enjoy children, they may enjoy a few things, they may have good qualities about them. But because I've worked on these areas of my life, I really know now what I'm looking for, because I know what's a match. But if I don't invest in myself, all of this is still open. It's up for grabs. And I pick someone, and then I develop after they're in my life. It's going to be a challenge, because I'm going to look and realize, wow, there are a lot of areas that I'm now developed in. I'm not too sure. You see? Yeah. And now there's no out in that. You have to work with what you have. And so what I want to encourage people is, since marriage should be lifetime.
God
right.
has planned us to get
exactly.
married for lifetime.
Exactly. Since it's for a lifetime, and once I'm in it, I'm not going to be out.
No, exactly.
Then I want to make sure that I'm the right person before I start dating, because I want to make sure that the pool from which I pick people to date are the kind of people that are already in the environment that I'm at already. It's just a matter of discerning whether we're a match on these levels. We're not trying to figure out things that we should have figured out while we were apart from each other. That's important. Another thing I would want to talk about is hookup culture. We live in a day and age where it's hook up, shack up, break up. Cohabitation is at an all-time high in our society. People want to not only date, they want to live with each other and enjoy all of the benefits of marriage without being married, if you will, in order to figure out whether you're the one. Because we're afraid, and because we live in a culture that has imposed fear on us about going forward to marriage. And so we want to be sure. Well, this hookup culture has really ruined a lot of relationships and has ruined a lot of marriages, because studies have shown that couples who cohabit for many years and then decide to marry are at an all-time higher likelihood of having their relationships entertaining divorce, if not ultimately entering into divorce. In other words, what we've discovered is there's nothing necessarily about cohabitation that seems to provide us the answers or the relief that we thought we would get by going God's way. And so I would encourage people to make sure that if you're going to date and enter into a relationship, make sure you're in a season to do so, right? Unless you are gonna date with a view toward marriage, you shouldn't be dating. At all. Unless you're gonna date because you're in a season where this thing could potentially go all the way, you shouldn't be dating. It's not intentional. And if dating is supposed to be dating at all, it should be intentional dating. Dating with a view toward marriage, and that's more courtship.
Can I do dating at the age of 18? What age do you think is legit?
Yeah. You're not ready for dating simply because you have a couple of dollars in your pocket and you want to take her somewhere to watch a movie or get some ice cream at Brahms or go to the park, right? There's far more to dating than that.
Okay.
And so all dating, see, the problem is we don't have dating in the Bible, the word, but we do have pictures of what takes place. Paul tells Timothy to treat the younger women like sisters and the older women like mothers, and the older men like fathers and the younger men like brothers. In other words, outside of the dating relationship or marriage, the relationship that men and women, opposite sexes, should have with each other is that of familial relationships, that of siblings. I have a sister, so I know what that relationship should look like. It's healthy. If I were to cross that line, you would know that that's gross, that something is not right about that. Something's off. In the same way, within the church, within the body of Christ, within the community, the men and the women, 14, 17, 23, it doesn't matter, should relate to each other like siblings if they're not married, right? That's what Paul is encouraging Timothy to lead in as a role model and to set the culture within the church. Other men and women should follow cues from you, right? Treat them like sisters. Notice, Paul doesn't give a laundry list of how to relate. Touch this way, shake this way, kiss this way. Don't. He says, I know you know what a relationship between siblings should look like. That should be enough of a criteria, a metric for how the relationships within the community should exist. Now, since we're not truly siblings, what happens if I take an interest in someone? Well, Song of Solomon tells us not to awaken love before it's time. In Song of Solomon 2 and Song of Solomon chapter 8. We're not supposed to be awakening love before it's time. So apparently there's this time where it's fine for everything that we find in the entirety of the book to happen. The writer of Hebrews in Hebrews 13 and 4 tells us, marriage is to be held in honor among all. And the marriage bed is undefiled. That's its time. That's its time. In other words, what's going on in the bedroom, in the marriage bed, is fine, so long as they're in covenant before God and others, right? That marriage, that contract, that covenant is ratified. They have now each other. A woman's body is not her own, and the man's body is not his own. And so that context of marriage is fine. That's the right time. And what Solomon in Song of Solomon says, we're not supposed to arouse or awaken love before it's time, the marriage bed. Why? There, it's undefiled, which means outside of it, it's defiled. Exactly. Paul says in 1 Corinthians 6 that sexual, I wish that everyone were like me, but I realize that not everyone has that gift. And I know that if there's any among us who are burning with passion, they're to marry. Why? Because he doesn't want them to commit sexual immorality. Sexual immorality is not just sexual intercourse or penetration, although it includes that. It's everything that leads up to that. The Greek word porneia was all-encompassing. It included every form of sexuality or sexual expression that no doubt ultimately culminated in sexual intercourse. Foreplay was not supposed to be done so that you can stop all of a sudden. That's horrible. God never designed foreplay and the arousal that takes place within our bodies so that we just cut it off. No, God created all of that so that it might find its head, its culmination in actual sexual intercourse and orgasm. And so for us to come up and fabricate some system that allows us to be able to enjoy each other up to a point, but no further, is tying ourselves. It's creating an artificial situation in an unhealthy situation. It's awakening love and then trying to kill it and suppress it. And what Solomon is saying is once love is awakened, it's supposed to go all the way, which is the marriage bed. And if it does without marriage, it's sexual immorality. So my concern for our young people who are entering into significant relationships where they feel deeply about one another. I mean, after all, you're not buddies. Why don't you just go out? Why date? That means she's off limits for everyone if you're dating. You've put yourself in some category that the Bible doesn't recognize. It recognizes the marriage relationship, it recognizes the family relationship, and it recognizes the neighbor relationship. We're supposed to love our neighbor like ourselves. It doesn't recognize this fourth category of dating relationship. We've created it, and now we're trying to take what only is permitted in this other category and put it in there. And God hasn't allowed that. And now we're trying to figure out what to do. Well, we need to question the existence of it in the first place, you see? And I think we have created a category where there's a relationship. Somehow when I say, will you date me? Will you go steady with me? Will you go out with me? That means she shouldn't be caught with another person. And if she were, I have the right to be upset about that, and vice versa. But she's not married to me. But apparently she's off limits. And so now we're in this stage where we're dating. But if anyone were to ask me, so are you going to marry her? Why are you asking me that? I'm not even thinking about that. So now marriage is not even in view. We're just dating. So it's not defined. It's not intentional. It's not going anywhere. There's no vision. There's no purpose behind it. We're just with each other. But we're not married. But we're not just friends. So now the question is, what can you do with each other? Since it's a unique relationship, it's not like before you guys knew each other, you were friends. So do you have rights on each other? Each other's lips, each other's bodies, each other's minds, each other's emotions? What's supposed to be going on during this time? Oh, no, we just study, or she comes to my games, or we do things with others. So, but you're dating. Yeah, but we're just friends. Okay. So how is it unique? It's not unique. So then why don't you just keep it the way it was? Because I wanted someone to date with. Well, are you going to marry? No, I'm not going to marry. So now you're in this place, you see. So it makes it very complicated. And so now what ends up happening is pressure comes on him, pressure comes on her. You mean to tell me, girl? The girls come. You got him dating you and you haven't even allowed him to kiss you? Do you know how his buddies must be getting on him, his case about that? You haven't allowed him anything? And now she feels guilty. And now they said, he's going to have eyes for another girl if you don't give him something. You got to give him at least something for the fact that to keep him. And so now the pressure comes on, the obligation. And that's what happens. The door ends up opening more and more. We're awakening love before it's time. This is a good example I like to give people. There's nothing like going shopping without money. Why? Because one of two things happens. You either leave that place frustrated, that mall, because you saw a lot of things, shoes, jeans, blouses, purses, you name it. You either saw a lot of things that you really wanted, but you didn't have the money to buy. And so now you leave frustrated. Or two, you leave with something that doesn't belong to you. We call that stealing. And that's what happens in dating. One of two things happens when we begin dating relationships that we don't have the money for, if you will. Every time I drive up to her house or pull up to the driveway to drop her off yet again, one of two things happens. You either walk away from each other frustrated that yet again you spent time again with each other, great time, intimate, emotional time, but you left each other frustrated because you didn't have a chance to do anything, to go where you would like to go, where marriages can go. Or two, eventually what's going to end up happening is you leave each other taking a piece of each other that doesn't belong to you yet, that only belongs to you after marriage. And that's what happens a lot of times. And so relationships are like a fireplace. Fire within the fireplace, we used to have a real fireplace, not a gas one, and I was responsible for taking care of it, and it's wonderful. You know, it keeps you warm, and it's a joy to be around, and it's kind of cozy and wonderful. But to find that same fire get out of the fireplace and into the rest of the house is destructive. It's a danger. Fire in the fireplace, wonderful, comfortable, cozy, great. Fire outside of the fireplace, it's hell. You burn the house down. It's destructive. Everyone is running. And I think that's how relationships are. Marriage is that fire in the fireplace. It's wonderful. It's great. It's great. But to experience a relationship like that of a marriage, outside of marriage, is like that fire outside of the fireplace. And that's what I would leave to our people.
These are wonderful illustrations, both of them. I really love them. But if someone is in that kind of situation right now as we speak, what would you tell them?
Mm-hmm. Well, we want to live in community. We want to make sure that we're accountable. We want to make sure that we're allowing people to speak into our lives. We want to make sure a true Christian, a true disciple is prepared to hear things, even if they may be hard to hear in the beginning. Faithful are the wounds of a friend, but the kisses of an enemy are deceitful. The Bible tells us to be open to the counsel of many. In the multitude of counsel, there's safety. We want to make sure that we allow people to speak the truth in love to us. We want to make sure that we're not only making choices that are comfortable, but we're making choices that result in our ultimate good. And so I know these kinds of things could be hard to hear, but I would just encourage and ask, what are your plans for that relationship? What have you envisioned? Are you prepared to honor God's word and God's values for what should be going on in a relationship? Are you prepared to still toe the line with everything that the Bible teaches about how a man and a woman, a boy and a girl are supposed to be relating to each other? Or are you prepared to drop a lot of things in order to make this relationship exist? And I think it's going to be very problematic to really have a relationship with someone that you really matter to. I mean, that's why I wanted to go forward and get married with my wife. Is I was telling my family and friends, she's not my buddy. I feel strongly about this person, and I don't want to blow it. And I realize if I care that much about her, and if I'm that attracted to her, then I'm going to want to go all the way to make sure that when that time comes, it's come in the right setting, because I don't want to awaken love before it's time.